Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a little bit of coverage of the 2020 worldwide box office numbers, which have plummeted 71%. Obviously, most of that is because of the coronavirus, but we'll go ahead and dive into those numbers anyway, just to see exactly how much money was lost overall, and what the potential future of the box office looks like in 2021 and beyond. But before we do, please be sure to smash the like button, smash the rumble button if you're watching over there. Also, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell notification. That way you get notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. I am once again joined by Baby Thor, who is playing behind me, and so there very well could be another break in the video, and he might be joining me once again, depending on how well he's doing so far. He's doing okay. But as you can see from this Deadline article, 71% drop to $12.4 billion was the total amount of money made by the film industry. I imagine that does not consider how much money they spent on the film and on marketing, so that is just the raw box office numbers, but it is still much less, 71% less than it was in the previous year. It says here that this going into the strength of international piracy concerns and hope dominate 2021 Chatter Global Studio Rankings chart. So this is going to go through all the different studios and how they did in this year. But yeah, piracy obviously has skyrocketed because when you force people to stay at home, guess what? It means that they're going to have more time on their hands, and it means that they're more likely to, because they're not being allowed to go out of their houses, and depending on where they are, they're going to say, well, I still want entertainment, I still want to watch movies, and so therefore I will find ways to watch them. It says here, with an estimated $12.4 billion in global grosses, $10.2 billion of which came from international box offices. Oh boy. 2020 was off overall by 71% and 67% respectively from 2019, according to Gower Street Analytics. It's a year the world at large would like to forget, but in industry terms, it provided interesting phenomena to reflect upon even as we look ahead in 2021. What is very interesting there is the fact that that means it was what? A little over $2 billion that was made just in the United States alone. Oh boy. One film alone in the last couple of years made well over that in box office numbers. That, of course, would be the Avengers Endgame. But we've had several $2 billion films and several billion-dollar films, especially in the last 10 years. So it's kind of insane when you think about just how much money that means not being made in a year. It goes on to say, a stealthy yet ubiquitous spore, cinema stops and starts, streaming, solace, Sinnoh's strength, and the stunning performance of Demon Slayer were among the dominant forces affecting the global and international box office in 2020. Demon Slayer proving that not even a pandemic can stop people from going to see movies that they have genuine interest in, breaking a record. It is now the highest grossing film in Japan. Highest grossing film in Japan during a year of a pandemic. That is something that I think indicates that, one, people do still have the desire to go out to see movies, and also, two, that people want to see movies that they actually have genuine interest in, something that I think Hollywood hopefully learns from, instead of trying to push for political propaganda to be pushed into their films. It goes on to say, within that, one of the key takeaways for industry executives we spoke with was the power of overseas markets and their local titles, which demonstrated that if people feel safe and the product is there, they will enthusiastically return to multiplexes. And in fact, I would say that people would go if the product was there and not so much with the first one. Obviously, that does have an impact. I know there's several people that leave comments on my videos saying that they don't feel comfortable, that they don't feel safe, or that they will come back when they feel safe, which might not be for a while. So it definitely is there. But I think people will go, through a lot to watch a product that they want to see on the big screen. How do I know this? Well, just look back to the last several years that we've had of midnight premieres, right? People will stay up late, even on a work night. People will buy tickets months in advance, will wait in lines for hours just to be able to see a product and see a film that they want to see. Again, I know that this has happened before, and so obviously we know that people can be motivated by their passions, right? By their fandoms. But when those fandoms are not being respected, when those fandoms are being taken advantage of, and also when you have all this other stuff going on, that can absolutely have a major impact on these things. That's the reason why when you look at the overall box office, it was going down every single year. Obviously, 2020 was a major exception because you had a pandemic, but it makes a lot of sense as to how this is all happening as well. All right, it goes on to say here, grosses outside of North America repped 82% of worldwide takings in 2020 versus 73% in 2019. While studios may have collectively been down by about 81%, both on a worldwide and overseas basis, folks are encouraged that COVID won't kill the theatrical business. Overseas, I think that's one thing that people are seeming to forget about, is that overseas the numbers were actually doing were doing okay. Again, Japan was setting records there. When you look and compare that to American numbers, it really isn't all that good. And I would say that you should very much be concerned with when American culture, very different than other cultures around the world, is getting used to just waiting for things to come out on HBO Max, on Disney Plus, etc., versus going out to actually see a movie. Again, there's going to be two sides to that. There's some people that cannot wait to go back, who are excited to go back, who are already going back to theaters if they're in a state that has it allowed to be open, while others are saying, yeah, I really have no need to go there anymore, and I've been enjoying my large TV at home, and everything's becoming a lot cheaper, right? 4K TVs, especially large 4K TVs, are a lot less expensive than they used to be. And so people are going to be a lot happier just staying at home and consuming media that way, right? Being able to pop their own popcorn for significantly less money, getting their own beverages for significantly less money as well. Again, all of these things are taken into account. And again, the American marketplace is not going to be the same as the international one. So I think it's a mistake to compare international success to local domestic success, right? I think the theaters overseas absolutely are going to do very well. Keep in mind that you have local properties in China, local properties in Japan, local properties in those major markets that are doing very well among their people. We don't really see the same thing here to the same degree. One could argue that we could have potentially seen something to that effect with an Avengers-type movie, like a giant superhero film that tend to do very well, but then we can also look to the fact that there have been films that have not done so well, or not done so well in comparison to other movies, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a marketplace where Hollywood really isn't trying anymore. They're not trying to tell really good stories. They're going to lowest common denominator. They're just basically telling artificial corporate stories. You have directors saying that they don't want to work with, Marvel or any of those major companies because they're being told what to do and how to direct. And at the end of the day, most people don't want to see the same thing over and over again. It says here, the full economic effect of COVID has yet to be fully assessed. However, studios forced to jockey during ever-shifting cinema closures, reopenings, and reclosures around the world should recoup what they lost on shelved 2020 releases, minus interest, a finance source tells us. I would love to find out how they're going to do that. It goes on to say, quote, when the pictures are released, revenue will come in, offsetting expenses from picks sitting in limbo, the person says. Quote, many of the pictures that were pushed are event product, so I expect robust box office revenue and profits. Beware, however, there is much unreleased product that studios cannot cannibalize each other's pictures. That is a big point. And also, I don't know exactly what this person is thinking. I understand the concept of, well, the movies haven't been released yet, and so once they do get released, they'll make money. But I think they're failing to remember that they're not going to make nearly as much money as they would have initially, right? You're going to have a lot of people that are not going to want to go back to theaters, and so you're going to lose a major chunk of the theater-going populace here in the United States. And so you have to take that into account. You also have to take into account the fact that, as you mentioned, you now have several major studios with several tentpole films, all of whom need to make some money back on those projects. And so therefore, they're all going to try and release it within the same time frame as others, right? They might give a little breathing room overall to make sure that they can make as much money as they can on their products, but a lot of them feel like they're running out of time. And also, when are they going to release those movies, right? Are they going to be able to make those numbers that you're talking about here, right? Saying that they're event product, they expect robust box office. Are you expecting robust box office in the United States in 2021? I'm not. I don't think any major film is going to make a crap ton of money stateside this year. I just don't see that happening. I go ahead and look to films like, for instance, Wonder Woman 1984, which right now has been a financial bust. It is not making any money here stateside, and it's making some money overseas, but in comparison to other films in most countries, it's not going up nearly as well, and it looks like it's going to be a major financial loss. Obviously, we don't know how much money it's going to make from HBO Max, but based on the box office numbers that we do have access to, it's like $200 million in the red as we speak. Most films in its, with its production budget would probably have cut that in half by now, at least. Not looking like that will be the case for that movie. It goes on here to say, but in 2021, to what degree studios and overseas markets bounce back depends on what happens to release schedules amid ongoing uncertainty surrounding the COVID pandemic and as key majors in Europe and elsewhere extend lockdowns. That's the other major thing. We also have a new administration coming into power here in the United States. An administration that's been very open about wanting to do national mask mandates and also national lockdowns. So if you honestly think that this is going to be the year that you're going to have a huge bounce back for theaters stateside, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention to the things going on. And even if they were to come back, even if they were to try and make a comeback this year, because they've been putting things off for so long, I don't think that they would get the popular support that they expect to get back. I imagine that when things get back to, quote, normal, I would say by 2022, 2023, realistically, you're going to see that the movie-going populace will have changed dramatically, and therefore the high numbers that oftentimes people expected for bigger budget films are going to be tremendously less, at the very least in our local marketplace. Overseas, it looks like there is still something there, but at least here stateside, I don't see that happening anytime soon of it getting back and getting better. This is a major issue on the minds of international distribution executives. Add to that concerns over piracy given shortened or shattered domestic windows, and also putting things onto digital in high quality format, which becomes that much easier to rip. That's also a major thing that you need to talk about too. Basically, the entire nature of piracy is going to change, because no longer do you have to wait for someone with a shoddy camera to film something and put it online. Now you'll get a nice crisp 1080p stream within hours of the film being released on any of these services. It goes on to say, the impact of streaming and the need for films that encourage people out of their homes, as well as potentially increased focus on local language productions. And then we end up with a snapshot of what comes the next 12 months. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is that, yeah, you might have local language movies that have not been major markets for movies, in overseas markets, doing relatively well because people like to see movies that they can understand and not have to worry about reading subtitles, for instance. And so you might have an increase in those markets. In fact, you might see a boom in international markets and international films because of the very reason. But here stateside, we already have had Hollywood, run the industry for a very, very long time. And so we don't have nearly as much desire to see something new, especially since Hollywood has gotten very stale and has really stopped innovating in a lot of areas. There are some directors that I think are still innovating, whether it's through story or effects. You can go to a Christopher Nolan, you can go to a Quentin Tarantino or others like that. But overall, it's just kind of gotten to this very tepid point. It says here, below we take a look at the rear view at an unprecedented year and a look ahead to the next 12 months. And so here is the overall worldwide box office ranking. So Disney, which of course acquired Fox, domestically, dear Lord, the domestic total gross, this is insane. The domestic total gross for 2020 for Disney, $441 million. International, $816 million. That's a total of $1.2 billion. Disney only made $1.2 billion in box office sales, and that's not including you subtracting money for what they spent on movies and marketing. That's just the actual raw box office number. So as far as how much money the movie studio actually made, based on that number, I don't think they made that much at all, because they get 60% of that entire number, which means you see close to $600 million. You take into account how much it costs to spend on the various films that they spent on. You had a film like Artemis Fowl, which was complete crap that they had to release on their streaming service. That didn't really make any money for them, but cost them a lot of money. You go to a film like Onward. Onward lost well over $100 million. There's still $100 million in the red for Onward. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think they maybe made any money based on the numbers that I'm seeing here. Now, again, that's just based on rough estimates, but still, that's not very good. Not to mention, they've had several big budget films that they've had to sit on, which means they've had to accrue interest on, which means it's just costing them in the end. So not only did they lose tons of money through their theme parks being closed, I don't think they made much money back in theaters either, based on these numbers. That is incredibly low. And again, I know it's a pandemic. It's something to look into. Sony was next, making a total of $1.1 billion. Warner Brothers with $1.08 billion. That's another company that's set to lose a lot of money. Obviously, it's got major projects like Wonder Woman 1984, which is not doing very well right now. Universal, which usually actually puts out a crap ton of smaller films that make a lot of money. I think Universal was the one that did The Invisible Man that ended up making a lot of profit, like raw profit. And, it cost almost nothing for them to make the film, and they made a lot back. I believe that was associated with Universal. Paramount made less than $1 billion. That made less than $500 million. Gosh. And Lionsgate, which normally makes a lot of money, especially from its more horror-oriented content, made $0.19 billion. And so even though Disney was at the top of all this, $1.26 billion is not very good. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my box office numbers. And so I do have a website, by the way, ombreviews.home.blog. It's a work in progress. I'm trying to do what I can to add more stuff to it. But I do some box office tracking. Obviously, I fell behind because a lot of films just stopped coming out. But going back to some of these movies, right? Going back to some of these films, you have right now a movie Soul 2, which just got released onto their Disney streaming service. That movie cost a decent amount of money too, and it's not making any money internationally. And so that's a film that actually could be a giant bust for them. I'm trying to find out where I can get access to it's not letting me scroll for some reason, and I don't know why, and I just did that too. Oh boy, things are crazy today. Let me see if refreshing it will, there it is, that's what I was looking for. So as you can see here, from this window, if you look over to what they were able to do with Soul, right? Soul is the second film. Right now, it's in the red, negative $205 million. This negative 220, that's Onward. Onward was well over... Onward lost $220 million for them. Now, keep in mind, this film came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. But still, that is a lot of money to lose. You also had a film, The Call of the Wild, as well, which didn't make any money either. That lost $123 million. That was another one of their films. That was one that I would believe was associated with Fox when they picked that film up. So as you can see, the money that they made from their movies, if you take into account how much they spent and how much they got back on it, I don't think that they made that much, if any at all, on that $1 billion they made worldwide, which is insane when you think about it. And going back to Universal, right, I mentioned before about The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man was successful because The Invisible Man only cost $9 million to make. So with marketing, it was 13.5. That film ended up making, let me see if I can find it over here. That film ended up making $138.8 million on a $13.5 million total cost, meaning that when you take into account how much of the cut of the box office number it gets, it made over $70 million, right, around $70 million in raw net gain, net profit. So you look to films, you look to studios like Universal, which probably lost money elsewhere. Again, I don't know all the films that were done by them. Obviously, Disney had the most big budget films to come out in 2020. But I look to that and I think to myself, okay, even though they were lower on the charts, they actually may have very well made more raw money than Disney did, because Disney had a lot of major projects and none of them, to my knowledge, in 2020 made a crap ton of money. I think they had a loss on all of them, or they had to delay them, and so they've lost money on that just by accruing the interest. And so this is very fascinating stuff. So what is kind of the major takeaway from all of this? Well, obviously there was a pandemic. We're still in the midst of a pandemic, right? Lockdowns are still going on for some damn reason. In the United States, we have more lockdowns on the way, right? We have an administration that's going to be very pro-lockdown, pro-mask mandate, which is just going to make things worse. It's just going to raise the temperature up in our country for a wide variety of reasons, but it's also going to have an impact on the box office too, because it means that less people will be able to go to the box office. It means that new, movie times that we've had are probably going to be delayed or changed, or we'll just continue to see films get released and make no money whatsoever. Like even Tenet, going back to Warner Brothers, Tenet made over $300 million worldwide. You have to take that into account when you look at this number. And guess what? They lost money on that film. Not nearly as much as some of the other films that I mentioned, but still, it was a net loss for them overall. And so studios are going to have to do a lot this year to make that money back. I don't think they've really figured out how to do that at this point. I know some people have said, yeah, but you had a film like Trolls, was it Trolls 2 World Tour, that got released on PVOD and ended up making a lot of money. And obviously we can see the money that it made from it, but in comparison to what it would have made in an actual box office, it is very, very small in comparison to what it would have been. I'm pretty sure they were able to make their money back only because the way that they split the money there is a lot more favorable to studios than what the split is normally with theaters. But at the end of the day, too, I don't think that was kind of one of those exceptions. That's the only film, to my knowledge, that did nearly as well. It's one of the few films, too, where they actually told us how much money they made. Most of the other studios have been very mum on how much money they've been making as far as PVOD sales, etc. I mean, just go ahead and ask Disney Plus, for instance, about how much money they actually made from Mulan. We really haven't got a complete answer from that quite yet. So box office obviously had a bad year across the entire world in 2020. International markets look like they're actually doing okay. International markets in some areas are actually doing much better. As I said, Japan, one of their films set a record for their country. And so I really do think that the takeaway is that American studios, American theaters are in a very bad strait. You're going to see AMC struggling to try to get money. They very well could have to close a lot of theaters. Regal, who knows what's going on with them? They've been closed for most of the year. They reopened for a short time, and then they decided to close everything again, and even in the midst of AMC and Cinemark staying open. Cinemark seems to be one of the only chains that's actually doing kind of well, in reference to how things are going, to the point where there's been speculation that they're going to try and buy up some of the theaters from AMC. We'll see if that actually happens. They've denied it, saying that they're not in a position to buy theaters right now, but with theaters starting to get movies again, maybe, hopefully, who knows, then they might be in a better position to do so. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Do you think the box office is going to get any better? Again, major financial losses for all these studios, especially Disney. Again, Disney, I think, lost the most this year, especially when it comes to their film content, because going back to Mulan also cost them a lot of money, and we don't know how much money they were actually able to make. There was that one figure that came out early on that it made like hundreds of millions of dollars. And then you look at the numbers and they were like, wait a minute, this doesn't work. Doesn't make sense. And then they realized, oh, it's actually a range and it could have made significantly less money. And since they haven't reported it yet, something tells me that they probably did make a lot less money. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video, please smash the like button, smash the rumble button if you're watching over there. I also upload those to Minds Plus in addition to everything, just to make sure I cover all my bases. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my January 2021 Patreon and Subscribestar members: Albertus Magnus, Ali C83, Andrew Hoyle, Animation Commentator Brian P, Dion, Divex, Enrique Evangelista, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, The Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jay, Jeffrey Toon, Jonathan Carney, Laura Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody and his beautiful twin with the beautiful hair, Orange Hat Reviews, On to June, Out of Step with Reality, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Steve Glasker, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And also a huge shout out to my Subscribestar peeps: Stan 4, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, Darkstar 57, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., US 888209 Fast, Dean Heiss, J-Rod the Beer Guru, Nevadan G. Adams, and ZK Man. You guys are all freaking amazing. Thank you so very much for being supporters. If you want your name shouted out, please consider joining on Patreon, where for $1 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream. For $5 a month, you get access to that, and also you get access to exclusive giveaways, where I give away 4Ks, Blu-rays, digital codes, etc. $10 a month will get you all that, plus also access to a special podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. Lots of fun. We do Q&As from that as well, so you get access to asking those Q&As, asking us any wide variety of questions. And for $25 a month, you get all of that stuff, plus you get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream. And also for that first month, you get a free t-shirt shipped anywhere throughout the world. So if you want to consider any of those things, please check out the links in the description below, where you can find my Subscribestar and Patreon, and also other ways to support the channel. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless.